Billionaire was suddenly left alone in court, no one expected a janitor to step forward and say, "I'll defend him." What happened next left the entire courtroom stunned. It was supposed to be the trial of the year. Reporters packed the halls of Alhama County Superior Court, some from Sacramento, others from Phoenix, even a few who flew in from Boise. Microphones ready, cameras rolling. All eyes were on Bradford Crane, the billionaire developer accused of financial misconduct, offshore accounts, shady wire transfers, and a long trail of shell companies linked to housing scandals and tax games dating back over a decade. He sat tall in a tailored gray suit, stoic and silent, while his attorney, the legendary Victor Bledsoe, commanded the defense like a general in battle. Bledsoe was famous for winning impossible cases, from politicians to public figures. If anyone could shield Crane, it was him. Then came the moment no one saw coming. On the third day of the trial, just as the judge requested clarification on a financial report, Bledsoe calmly closed his folder. He didn't ask for a recess. He didn't offer an explanation. He simply turned to the judge and said, "I'm done, Your Honor." The room froze. The judge blinked. "Excuse me? I'm withdrawing," he replied, effective immediately. "I won't waste the court's time any longer." Gasps filled the courtroom. Bradford turned, stunned. The man who had defended him through 2 indictments and half a dozen hearings had just walked out, briefcase in hand, coat buttoned, without looking back. Reporters erupted. People shouted. One woman dropped her phone trying to capture the moment. Was that legal? Could a lawyer just abandon a client like that? And there sat Crane, a billionaire with no defense, suddenly exposed. But then, at the very back of the courtroom, someone moved. He wasn't wearing a suit. He didn't carry a briefcase. He was just a middle-aged black man in navy blue coveralls, holding a mop and a spray bottle. Leonard "Lenny" Garrison had worked those courthouse floors for 19 years. He knew every judge's coffee order and which bailiff never cracked a smile, but he wasn't supposed to speak. Still, he cleared his throat and said, loud and clear, "I'll defend him." Every head turned. Lenny stepped forward. No stutter, no hesitation. "I said, I will defend Mr. Crane." A thick silence fell, the kind that tightens in your chest. Judge Delgado leaned forward, cautious. "Sir, do you have a license to practice law?" Lenny shook his head. "No, ma'am." "Then I can't allow—" "I'm not asking to represent him officially," he interrupted. "I'm asking to speak. Just give me 5 minutes. If you still want me to leave, I'll leave." The room shifted. Some laughed. Some rolled their eyes. The DA smirked and leaned into his mic. "Your Honor, are we really letting the cleaning crew take the floor now?" More laughter, mocking and cruel. But Lenny didn't flinch. He stepped forward again, calm, grounded. "Let them laugh," he said, locking eyes with the judge. "But that man helped my family when no one else did. I may not have a legal degree, but I know when someone's being steamrolled. Let me speak." Bradford's expression broke. For the first time that week, it changed. He turned to Lenny, blinking in disbelief. "Wait, Lenny?" Lenny nodded quietly. "Yeah, it's me." The courtroom buzzed like a school hallway during a fire drill. The judge pinched the bridge of her nose, exhaling slowly. "Mr. Garrison, this is highly unusual." "I know," he said, "but you just watched him get abandoned. Someone has to say something." A beat passed. The judge tapped her gavel once. "I'll give you 3 minutes," she said. "That's all. You're not under oath." No one in that room knew who Lenny really was. Not yet. But they were about to find out. "You're not part of the defense team, Mr. Garrison, and this court doesn't typically allow outside voices to interrupt proceedings," Judge Delgado said carefully. "But I want to hear what this is about." Lenny nodded once and stepped forward into the space where the lawyer had stood just moments earlier. He glanced at the jury, then at Bradford, before raising the spray bottle still in his hand like a pointer in a classroom. "You want to talk about deception, about manipulation?" he began, calm but steady. "Then let's talk about it." He held up the bottle for all to see. "This is ammonia, mixed with vinegar and hot water. It'll scrub just about anything off these floors. Blood, coffee, even the things no one likes to admit are there. I've cleaned them all, but the stain I see now, it's not on the floor. It's in this system. The room was still, tense, waiting. He pointed to Bradford. 6 years ago, my son Tariq and I were about to lose our apartment over a technicality. I'd been injured at work, missed a few shifts, and we got 2 weeks behind on rent. The management company sent someone to the door by day 3. My son was 15, smart, focused. He had a real shot at a scholarship if he stayed in school. Lenny paused, taking a breath. Bradford Crane didn't know me. We'd never met. But he sat on that company's board. And when he saw my case, maybe it was the grades, maybe he has a kid that age, I don't know, he told them to cancel the eviction. Personally. Because of that, my son got to stay in school. Because of that, I never forgot. He looked down for a moment, voice softening. That's why I couldn't just sit back and watch him face this alone. The prosecutor, Dean Kilmer, leaned into his mic, smirking. That's a heartfelt story, Mr. Garrison, but it has no bearing on the case. This is about financial wrongdoing, not charity. I'm not finished, Lenny said, raising his voice slightly. It cut through the courtroom noise like a blade. He turned back to the jury. All I'm saying is this. If you're going to paint him as some heartless villain, like he's never done right by anyone, that's not true. I may not be a lawyer, but I know when someone's being dragged through the mud unfairly. And if a courtroom won't hear the truth, what are we even doing here? Judge Delgado leaned back in her chair, unreadable. After a pause, she said, You've had your time, Mr. Garrison. Please return to your seat. Lenny gave a respectful nod and stepped away, quietly returning to the back bench. He set his mop and spray bottle beside him. No one said a word. Even Kilmer remained silent for a long moment. And Bradford? He didn't move. He just stared forward, jaw tight, eyes locked, his boardroom confidence stripped away. For the first time, he looked like someone who realized what it meant to be defended, not for power or fame, but because once, a long time ago, he simply chose to do the right thing. The session adjourned shortly after. Reporters rushed to file updates. Jury members were escorted out. Legal aides whispered theories like they were solving a mystery, but Lenny stayed seated, quiet, watching the polished floor he'd cleaned that very morning. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He never had. But something inside him had stirred, something he hadn't felt in decades, before the injury, before his wife passed, before life closed the doors he once dared to open. Back in the early 90s, Lenny had a dream, to become a lawyer. He studied at Fresno State during nights, worked construction by day, washed cars on weekends just to cover tuition. He believed in the law. He believed in fairness. Then came the accident. 1995. A scaffold collapsed at a job site in Visalia. 3 workers were hospitalized. 1 didn't survive. Lenny made it, but barely. Shattered shoulder, cracked ribs, endless bills. His wife Marcia worked extra shifts at the diner, but it wasn't enough. He dropped out 1 semester before graduating. It wasn't a choice. It was survival. He didn't speak about that chapter, not for years, only once, late one night, to his son Tariq, and then again, indirectly, to Bradford Crane. When the eviction notice came, Tariq was 16. Legal aid was overwhelmed. The building manager wouldn't negotiate. Lenny even offered to clean the lobby for free just to buy a few more days. Nothing worked. Then came a call from the corporate office. You don't need to worry anymore, the woman said. Mr. Crane asked us to cancel the eviction. It's handled. Lenny had asked twice, Are you sure you've got the right family? She was. He never forgot it. They never spoke, not until today. Now, as the courtroom emptied, Lenny rose quietly, mop in hand, and walked toward the exit, not as a janitor, not as a lawyer, but as someone who remembered and someone who chose to speak. He was halfway down the corridor when a voice called out, Mr. Garrison. Lenny turned. It was Bradford, now flanked by 3 security officers and a bailiff. His tie was loosened, his hair slightly out of place, but his voice was steady. "Hey, you remember me?" Lenny asked, genuinely surprised. "I never forgot," Bradford replied. "Didn't know you were still working here." Lenny gave a small shrug. Somebody's got to keep this place from smelling like old coffee and bad decisions. That got the faintest smile out of Bradford. "What you said in there? Why'd you do it?" Lenny leaned on his mop handle, eyes narrowing slightly. "Because you saw more than a name on a piece of paper. Back then, I was just another case file. You didn't owe me anything, but you stepped in anyway. I can't repay you the same way, but I can make sure people hear the full story." Bradford was quiet for a moment. "You know the press won't be kind about this. You might get blowback from lawyers, from your own job." Lenny gave a slow nod. "People like me have been dealing with blowback our whole lives. I'll manage." The bailiff gestured for Bradford to keep moving. "Thank you," he said softly. "You're welcome," Lenny answered, "but don't thank me yet. This isn't over." And it wasn't. As Lenny turned to head back toward the supply closet, something on a nearby monitor caught his eye. Outside courtroom 4B, a screen was replaying footage from an earlier presentation. Financial spreadsheets filled the display. Nothing flashy, just standard numbers. But something about one transaction stood out, a bottom line entry, a date and a figure that didn't fit. It was small, barely noticeable, but Lenny had worked with enough invoices and pay stubs in his life to trust his gut, and his gut was buzzing. To understand it fully, though, he'd have to dig into a world he'd walked away from decades ago. The next morning, there was a tension in the air. The courtroom felt heavier, like everyone was bracing for something. Judge Delgado entered 5 minutes late, coffee in hand, her expression unreadable. She paused, then addressed the room. "Before we begin today's proceedings," she said evenly, "I want to speak to what happened yesterday." All eyes shifted to Lenny. "The court is aware that Mr. Garrison is not licensed to practice law," she continued. "He will not be serving as formal counsel for Mr. Crane. However, after conferring with the district attorney and reviewing policy, I am permitting him to assist in an unofficial advisory role, as long as he does not question witnesses or address the jury." Gasps, then a hush. She turned directly to Lenny. "You'll follow my rules. No outbursts, no speeches, and no mop in the courtroom." Lenny nodded. "Understood, Your Honor." Then she turned her gaze to the prosecution table. "And if Mr. Kilmer smirks one more time, I'll hold him in contempt. This is a courtroom, not a stage." Kilmer's grin vanished. With that, court resumed. Kilmer strutted forward like he owned the floor. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, "behind all the designer suits and polished shoes, there are documents. Evidence. Records showing Mr. Crane knowingly moved funds into empty companies with fake names." He held up a few printouts. "Here's a transaction to LC Holdings, dated March 17th. Another to Nava Partners LLC, same day. Both linked to hidden accounts, both under Mr. Crane's supervision." He clicked the remote. 2 spreadsheets appeared on the courtroom screen. Kilmer laid out his case, confident and sharp. It was a strong narrative, intentional, calculated. Meanwhile, Lenny sat quietly, scribbling into a spiral notebook. No laptop, no microphone, just paper, pen, and instinct. He leaned toward Bradford and whispered, "Those names, LC Holdings, Nava Partners, you recognize them?" Bradford shook his head. "Number not firsthand. My CFO handles all routing." "What's her name?" "Dina Rossetti, been with me over a decade." Lenny nodded, keeping that name in mind. But something still didn't add up. During recess, Lenny pulled Bradford aside. "I think the whole case is built on documents you never saw. That LC Holdings payment? Yesterday I caught a glimpse of the memo line. It said, insurance settlement." Bradford frowned. "We don't process claims through ghost companies." "Exactly," Lenny said. "So who does?" Bradford hesitated. "I trust Dina with my life." Lenny raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that?" Before Bradford could respond, Dina Rossetti walked into the hallway, dark sunglasses, a luxury bag in hand, and barely a glance at either of them. She looked Lenny up and down. "You're the janitor, right?" she asked, amused. No, ma'am, Lenny replied without flinching. Today I'm the guy trying to stop this from going off the rails. Dina chuckled lightly. Good luck with that. Then she turned and walked away, heels echoing sharply across the floor. Bradford stared after her. She's been different lately. Cold, distant. I just figured it was pressure, or something she doesn't want found, Lenny muttered, watching her disappear. Back inside, court resumed. But something had shifted, and Lenny wasn't just watching anymore. He was investigating. Lenny wasn't watching the screen for numbers. He was watching the people. The way Kilmer avoided looking in Dina Rossetti's direction whenever her name came up. The way her posture stiffened every time LC Holdings was mentioned. And then it happened, so fast most missed it. Kilmer accidentally flipped to the wrong slide. It was up for just a second, but Lenny saw it. A wire transfer to LC Holdings, dated 1 week after Dina's name disappeared from the payroll list. He leaned toward Bradford. You let her go? No, Bradford said. She's still the CFO. You ever check if she's still cashing paychecks? Bradford blinked. What are you getting at? I think someone inside your company is using it against you. He scanned his notes. There it was again, a memo line reading, Policy reimbursement per DR. DR Dana Rossetti. Lenny sat back in his seat. He wasn't a lawyer, but he'd seen what betrayal looked like. And this wasn't just a case of paperwork gone wrong. This was a setup, but exposing it, that would be messy and dangerous. That night, Lenny didn't go home. He sat in a rundown diner on Foothill Boulevard. Surrounded by photocopies Bradford's assistant managed to pull before the office closed. Official evidence was off limits, but public filings and old payroll records? Fair game. He did what he'd learned from his father. Work quiet, careful, and without shortcuts. Somewhere between his fourth refill of bad coffee and a slice of pie that tasted like cardboard, he found it. LC Holdings wasn't some fake shell company hidden offshore like Kilmer claimed. It was a legally registered business in Reno, Nevada, tied directly to Dana Rossetti's cousin. The address? A UPS mailbox. The company had only one active contract, a consulting agreement with Crane Properties, signed not by Bradford, but by Dina, dated 5 weeks before she stopped attending board meetings. This wasn't mismanagement, it was theft, and the wrong man was on trial. The next morning, Lenny walked into the courtroom early, a slim stack of papers in his hand. He looked exhausted. He hadn't slept. As soon as Judge Delgado took the bench, he rose to speak. Your Honor, he said, voice clear, I have information that could impact this trial. Kilmer stood immediately. Objection! He hasn't even said anything. The judge cut in. Sit down, Mr. Kilmer. Lenny stepped forward. There is reason to believe this court has been misled. I'm requesting a formal review of records involving Ms. Dina Rossetti. I've brought public LLC filings, payroll logs, and signed contracts. The judge raised an eyebrow. On what grounds? Lenny held out the documents. Because there's evidence suggesting the financial activity tied to LC Holdings wasn't fraud orchestrated by Mr. Crane, but internal misuse of funds by someone inside his company. Kilmer's jaw clenched. This is a tactic, a distraction. Is it? Lenny replied, locking eyes with him. Because I can prove LC Holdings is real. And I can prove the woman behind it signed off on every transaction you called criminal, without Mr. Crane's knowledge. The judge looked down at the top page. Her expression shifted. Clerk, she said, send this to the forensic accounting team immediately. We'll break for 1 hour. Bradford turned to Lenny slowly, as if seeing him for the first time. How did you even know where to look? I've cleaned after 100 trials like this, Lenny said. You start to spot the patterns. When the court reconvened, the room was packed. Word had gotten out, somehow. Maybe a reporter overheard in the hallway. Maybe a clerk passed it on. Either way, the air buzzed with anticipation. Judge Delgado tapped her gavel. This court has reviewed the submitted materials, she began. It appears the financial trail leads to internal misappropriation carried out by Ms. Dina Rossetti. The LLC in question is legitimate, and there is significant evidence showing Mr. Crane had no direct knowledge of the transactions presented by the prosecution. Gasps rippled across the room. From the gallery, Dana stood abruptly. "That's not true!" she shouted. Two deputies rushed toward her. She didn't move, but her voice cracked. "He let me handle it," she cried. "He never paid attention. I did what I had to." She shook with anger and panic. "I gave you everything," she screamed at Bradford. "And you didn't even notice when I stopped showing up." The room was frozen as deputies gently escorted her away, her luxury handbag swinging uselessly at her side. Kilmer tried to recover. "Your Honor, this doesn't clear Mr. Crane entirely." "No," Judge Delgado interrupted, "but it completely changes the direction of this case. Court will reconvene tomorrow. Mr. Kilmer, I expect updated charges filed by then." Lenny sat back down, heart pounding. He had done it. He had no license, no credentials, but he had something more powerful. He was right, and in the end, that meant more than any framed certificate on a wall. Still, the truth being out didn't mean the battle was over. By morning, the courthouse was swarming like it was the finale of a national trial. Security doubled. Reporters crowded the steps. Inside, the air was electric, tension in every row, every glance. It felt like a verdict was coming before the jury had even been called. Bradford Crane didn't look like a billionaire anymore. His tie was straight, his suit perfect, but the weight on his shoulders was unmistakable. He looked like a man who had lived 10 years in a single week. And Lenny? He showed up in the same blue coveralls he wore every day. No suit, no tie, just quiet resolve. Judge Delgado entered and tapped her gavel once. "Before we proceed," she said, "this courtroom is not entertainment. It is not a stage. It is where truth fights for breath against pressure and power. And yesterday, we came dangerously close to forgetting that." She paused, then turned directly to Kilmer. "Mr. Kilmer, I expect you to move forward with corrected evidence and full honesty." Kilmer stood slowly, sweat glistening behind his ears. He adjusted his papers like they might anchor him. "In light of recent findings," he began, "we have reassessed Ms. Rossetti's role. It appears she acted outside of Mr. Crane's direct knowledge. Her actions may have misrepresented his awareness of these financial movements." A loud cough echoed across the courtroom. The crowd was losing patience with polite language and technical dodges. Kilmer pushed ahead. "While we accept the court's ruling, we are not dropping every charge. Mr. Crane may still bear responsibility for lack of oversight. That is corporate law." Lenny leaned over and whispered, "They're shifting the argument to negligence." Bradford nodded. "Let them." Then the unexpected happened. Judge Delgado turned to Lenny. "Mr. Garrison, you've been granted more space in this courtroom than anyone ever imagined. If you have something final to say, now is your moment. 5 minutes." Lenny stood. No speech in hand, no theatrics, just his voice, firm, grounded, and real. "Your Honor, members of the jury," he began, "I've worked in this courthouse for nearly 2 decades. Cleaned floors, scrubbed gum off benches, emptied trash for people who never once said thank you. I've listened quietly to more cases than I can count." He looked to the jury. "But I've learned something in all that silence. Truth doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes it's buried under a mountain of headlines. Sometimes it needs someone without a title to notice it." He gestured toward Bradford. This man made mistakes, trusted people he shouldn't have, looked away when he should have paid attention. But deliberate fraud, theft, that's not what happened here. And I wouldn't stand up for someone I believed was guilty. He didn't even remember my name until a few days ago. A few jurors shifted, but I remembered him, because once, when he didn't have to, he helped my son. And maybe that don't count in legal arguments, but it should count to people, because if we start judging guilt based only on what someone missed, then none of us are safe. He sat down. Silence. Then Judge Delgado spoke. "The jury will now retire for deliberation." 3 hours passed. When they returned, the room froze. The jury foreman rose, glanced at the judge, then looked at Bradford. "In the matter of criminal fraud and conspiracy," he said, "on all major charges, we find the defendant not guilty." Bradford exhaled, just once, then turned to Lenny. "I owe you everything. Lenny shook his head. Number, just don't forget this moment. Kilmer packed his things without a word. Outside, a reporter rushed Lenny. What made you think you could pull this off? Lenny gave a tired smile. I didn't, he said. I just couldn't stand by and watch someone fall alone, especially someone who once pulled me up. But the real win wasn't in the verdict. It was the quiet reminder that doing the right thing doesn't need a license, doesn't need approval, just courage. The press wanted a headline, a quote, a hero story. But Lenny gave them none of it. No interviews, no bestseller, just one statement on the courthouse steps. I didn't save a billionaire. I stood up when no one else would. And with that, he walked back inside and clocked in for his evening shift. Same mop, same hallway. He wasn't there for applause. He was just finishing what he started. 2 weeks later, the courthouse felt normal again. Cameras were gone. The noise faded. Dina Rossetti was facing federal charges. Her lawyer was already working on a deal. Kilmer had gone quiet. Rumors were swirling about a full audit of every case he'd touched in the past 2 years. And Lenny? He went back to work, unnoticed, uncelebrated, exactly how he liked it. Until one evening, near the water fountain, he saw her, Judge Delgado, heels off, sipping from a paper cup. She looked like someone who'd carried too many hard decisions for far too long. You know, she said softly, you could have walked away at any time. Lenny kept mopping. I thought about it. The media had their headline. They wanted a soundbite, a viral quote, a dramatic retelling of how a janitor saved a billionaire with nothing but a mop, a notebook, and a sharp instinct. They called it a miracle, a twist, a courtroom legend. Lenny called it common sense. He didn't give them the speech they wanted. No press tour, no book deal, no late-night interviews, just one sentence shared quietly at the courthouse steps. I didn't save a billionaire. I just stood up when no one else would. Then he walked back inside and clocked in for his evening shift. Same hallway, same mop. He wasn't looking for praise. He just had a job to finish. 2 weeks later, things returned to normal. The reporters disappeared. The cameras were gone. Dina Rossetti was facing federal charges, her lawyer already negotiating. Kilmer, the once cocky prosecutor, had gone strangely quiet. Word around the building was that the DA's office had started reviewing all of his cases from the last 2 years. As for Lenny, he went right back to what he did best, keeping the building running, clean, and unnoticed. That is, until one evening, Judge Delgado spotted him in the hallway. She stood near the water fountain, sipping from a paper cup, heels off, exhaustion in her eyes, the kind that comes from carrying silent responsibility too long. You know, she said gently, you could have walked away at any point. Lenny kept mopping. I thought about it. But you didn't, she said. He stopped for a second, then looked up. Because when the system breaks, someone's got to hold the pieces together, even if it's not their job. She nodded slowly. There's been talk, a recognition ceremony, commendation. I take it you're not interested? Lenny smiled. Only thing I want is a mop bucket that rolls without squeaking. She laughed softly. You'll get your bucket. Then she paused again. And if you ever change your mind about coming back, not as a janitor. No offense, he said, but I'm too old to chase a dream that already cost me once. She didn't push. Well, she said, not every hero wears a tie or a law degree. She walked away. Meanwhile, Bradford Crane did something most billionaires never do after walking free. He disappeared. No media appearance, no statement from his attorneys, no spin. He was spotted once in Modesto, sitting in a corner booth at a coffee shop, wearing jeans and a windbreaker, reading the newspaper like he didn't own a skyscraper downtown. A few weeks later, a thick envelope arrived at the courthouse. No return address. Inside was a single typed page. Lenny, I've stepped down from the company. I handed it off. It's time for something different. You reminded me what real accountability looks like. Not in a meeting, not in a courtroom, but in the quiet when no one's watching. Thank you, Bradford. Attached was a blank check, signed. Lenny ripped it in half and dropped it into the trash. He hadn't done this for a payout. That kind of money always came with invisible strings, and he wasn't about to become someone's redemption story. But there was one thing he did do. He met his son, Tariq, that weekend. Now in his 30s, Tariq worked tech support in Visalia and was raising 2 little ones of his own. They met in a park, nothing fancy. "You ever think about finishing law school?" Lenny asked. Tariq laughed. "With 2 toddlers? Sure, right after I learn to sleep standing up. I'll help," Lenny said. "With the kids and with tuition. You don't have to say yes. But just know, it's never too late to pick something back up." Tariq blinked. Where's this coming from? Lenny just smiled. Let's call it a long overdue promise. Because some stories don't end with cheers or medals or parades. Sometimes they end with a man walking home after a long shift, shoulders sore, heart light, and floor gleaming behind him. And that's more than enough. Because the truth is, you don't have to be rich or famous or powerful to change the outcome of a moment. You just have to show up when it matters. Even if you're the only one standing. If this story moved you, take a moment today to see someone often overlooked. The janitor, the bus driver, the cashier. Sometimes the ones closest to justice aren't wearing suits. They're wearing uniforms, and they're waiting for someone to finally see them.